One of my top watches from last year was the Wise Watches Adamascus 88 out of Thailand. A well-made, beautiful, dressy diver made with 904L steel and a ton of LUME. If you haven't heard of it before, it's definitely worth checking out. Well, recently, Wise approached me and asked me if I'd like to check out their newest release, which is their blue dial Damascus AD760, a pretty cool looking 39mm sports watch. And the interesting thing is that instead of the 904L steel that they made the diver with, this time they went with Damascus steel, giving this slim-cased watch a very unique look. But of course, there's more to a watch than just the case. Now, before we get to it, I do need to let you know that the promotional tag is up. And that's because Wise provided this watch, and I don't have to send it back. That out of the way, let's start talking specs. Here, Wise paired that 39mm case with a lug-to-lug of only 46.5. Then throw in a total thickness of 11.3mm, and you have a watch that should fit a wide variety of wrist sizes. It's also fairly lightweight at about 65 grams on its leather strap. And since it's a sports watch, or at least I think it's a sports watch, it also has 100 meters of water resistance with a signed screw-down crown. Rounding everything out, you also have a 20mm lug width, box-cut sapphire crystal with AR on the top, as well as a sapphire exhibition case back. And it's all powered by a Japanese Miyota 9019 movement. On my 7¼ inch wrist, it's pretty comfortable, and I'd say it wears like a true 39. Once the leather straps are properly broken in, the lightweight and slim nature of it ensures that it hugs your wrist and completely stays put. Now, the dial here is great, and we will get to that shortly. But thanks to the Damascus case, this is one where the case is almost as intriguing as the dial. Damascus steel always has that striped or random zebra-like pattern attached to it, or rather integrated into it. And here it's everywhere. The case back, the crown, even the strap's buckle is Damascus. In fact, I thought it was pretty cool when I first unscrewed the crown and saw that same pattern coming out of it. And I think it's those small touches that really make this cool. Plus, the slim and sleek nature of the case doesn't hurt either. The finishing here is great, and I love how the crystal rises out of it. And because of the Damascus steel, it is harder to tell, but there is a very nice beveled edge that runs down each side of the case, which helps highlight the curvature of the lugs. And you can also tell that it's just a tad Aqua Terra-ish, as there's also a very slim chamfer on the inside of those lugs. Indoors, the Damascus effect on the steel is a little muted. You see that there's something interesting to it, but it's nothing that's really just going to grab your attention from across the room. But once you take it outside, that effect really pops, and especially against this dial. It's eye-catching and intriguing. Of course, some are going to prefer just the look of a regular steel case. For them, nothing beats that clean and classic look. Anything else and it starts to get a bit tacky. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with that viewpoint. That's really the norm. And personally, I don't think I'd want all of my watches to look like this. But I do think it's rather cool to maybe have at least one that's a bit unusual. And the pattern here definitely makes this watch a little more unusual. And I like the fact that Damascus isn't as flashy as, say, a gold or bronze case. Yet it's still different and interesting, and I'd say it's somewhere in between. And in that way, I think it helps to accentuate and not distract from the dial as much as, say, just a pure gold case. With this one, the only downside that I've seen so far is that it makes the boring finish that's on a standard Miyota movement, well, even more boring, because it just really stands out. Last year, Wise put out a really good-looking 904L steel dress watch, and I think it's interesting to compare the two designs, as you can see that the dress watch is much more cleaner and conservative, whereas here, it's something different, something perhaps more striking or maybe aggressive, where it has these sharper, more pointed applied indices, as well as hands, not only giving this watch more of a sports watch vibe, but making it something that I think pairs better with the nature of a Damascus case. The dial color here is listed as deep aqua blue with the sunburst effect, but I think I'd call it more of a steel blue, or maybe blue steel. Either way, it's a surprisingly subtle color, to the point that it can even start to look a bit faded out, just depending on the light and the angles, which is something I think you can see in these shots. I mean, sometimes it looks absolutely brilliant, and other times it's a bit dull. In that way, it's actually pretty similar to the Zodiac Olympus I recently reviewed. And like that watch, I think for some, if you're expecting something more dressy, you're going to be disappointed with this. But I think that's not really the point they were going for. And in the end, I think it works perfectly with the case. If Wise had gone with a richer or deeper blue, it might appear more dressy, more flashy, and definitely more noticeable. And as a result, you might wind up ignoring the Damascus steel case, and that's half the reason this watch exists. But what Wise wound up doing here, whether it's intentional or not, I think creates a really good balance, where the dial and the case have an even presence. And as a whole, the watch is still good looking, but it's definitely more interesting and cool than flashy or dressy. The muted dial also winds up putting more emphasis on the indices and the hands, which are expertly done. From these macro shots, you can see they look amazing and are well defined, which you not only expect, but should demand on a watch at this price. The sharp aggressive indices I think pairs well with the handset, as well as the painted chaptering on the outer edge. I will say that the inner hour ring here is a little odd, and especially on a watch like this, as it does add to the crowded nature of the center, especially combining that with the branding and the text at the bottom. It winds up being maybe a little too much here. However, it does add to the functionality and makes it more readable. Plus, the font is a bit small, and I think can easily fade into the background. Unfortunately though, so can the hands and the indices when there's a bit of glare. I mean, if you're indoors, you got some lights behind you, all those reflections are going to start to add up here. And as such, the beautiful polished edges on those indices as well as the hands can get lost within the steely blue backdrop. It just seems to lose whatever limited contrast was there. I'm not sure how this one's coming across with your screens, but in person, it's amazing. It's just really cool to look at. However, with this colorway, I gotta say glare is its kryptonite. One of the great things about the diver from Wise that I saw was its LUME. And I really should be wearing it while filming this. It's downstairs, but instead I wound up wearing my Longines Conquest VHP. But either way, LUME on that diver was fantastic. It's one of the best I've ever seen, a full king of LUME. So I was really eager to see what the sports watch can do. And in short, it doesn't disappoint. In my comparison test, it not only beat out two divers, one of which is a Seiko and the other a microbrand, but it also outlasted a Manta Triumph, making it truly the last man standing in this test. However, I was still curious about how it compared to the actual diver. Now, because of its slimmer case, its slimmer handset and indices, I wasn't expecting it to beat it out. And it didn't, so it's not quite King of LUME level. But considering this thing's a sports watch, it still kept its own, and is overall fantastic. As for the movement, it's using a Miyota 9019. And no, I didn't mispronounce that, it's listed as a 19. Which is supposedly similar to the 9015, but with lower clearance for the hands, allowing for an overall thinner watch. Generally, I'm a big fan of the Miyota 9000 movements. And here, I think the only real question you should have is whether or not at this price it should have a Swiss Sellita rather than Miyota. Many consider the Sellita to be a more premium movement over any Japanese movement, but in reality they do have similar performance, so you wouldn't see much of a difference. It's more just a question on the value side of things. Anyway, as for the straps, the AD760 comes with two, and strangely, they're two similar dark brown straps, just with different textures. Both are really good straps and made with a good quality leather. Both have quick release, and both have a really cool Damascus buckle. So just pick your favorite style, and I think you'll be happy with it. I went with a more classic one, which I think is a calfskin leather. Although this also brings up another real potential negative of the watch, and again, it's all sort of related to that value argument, which is also something it shares with that 904L diver, and that's that neither of them offer a bracelet, which again is more of a value argument here. But the thing is, logically, I don't think I've ever seen a Damascus steel bracelet. I'm sure someone makes one, but I'm guessing they're not easy or cheap to make. So it's not really realistic to expect one here. So fully understand why there isn't, even though at this price some people would love to have one. And speaking of price, I believe Wise is selling these for about 700 bucks. And the value argument here is also going to get a little tricky, all thanks to that Damascus steel, as Damascus watches are always a little bit more, and value is going to depend if you're only limiting your comparables to other Damascus watches, or pretty much any sports watch with a similar spec. If you don't care about the Damascus steel, then I think you got your answer with that. Either way, Wise goes the extra mile in a lot of ways, and I'd say they're more of a mid to high-end micro brand. From the finishing of the watch, the straps used, and even its really awesome wooden watch box. It's impressive. So it's obvious they're not trying to be a value micro brand, and as such, they're going to charge a little more. Bottom line though, Wise makes a great watch that I think is worthy of the price. It's a watch that strikes a balance between attractive and cool, which to me is really what a sports watch is supposed to do. Something good looking, but not so dressy or fancy that you can't wear it with shorts and a t-shirt. So if you're looking for a sleek and slim Damascus steel sports watch, then Wise Watches is worth taking a look at. Which, granted, is a pretty limited audience. Because if you're just curious about Damascus steel, 700 bucks is a lot to spend on just curiosity. So that's not something I'd recommend unless you were really sure. And if you're not interested in Damascus at all, then as far as I know, there's no regular steel option available. Perhaps in the future, but as of right now, they don't have anything quite for you. Anyway, as usual, let me know your thoughts on the Wise Watches Adamascus AD760, or if you can think of something similar that does it better, let me know that as well. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, just do something down below. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.